Welcome to NBA Stories, where we dive deep into the moments and players shaping the modern game. Tonight we are talking about Victor Wembanyama and the realistic possibility that he could win the NBA Most Valuable Player Award in the 2025-26 season. I will walk through style of play, statistical expectations, team context, narrative drivers, competition, and the intangible factors that often decide MVP races. And I will also pause for a few emotional beats, because sometimes basketball is more than numbers. Okay, Victor Wembanyama is not just a unique talent, he is a generational anomaly. Standing over 7'4" with guard-like skill, he blends perimeter shooting, elite shot blocking, ball handling, and passing vision in ways few players ever have. His height and wingspan naturally alter shots, and mismatches on both ends of the floor. But his game is not merely anatomical advantage, it is practiced craft and expanding skill. He can catch and shoot from deep, attack closeouts, and finish around the rim with touch and creativity. On defense, he is a deterrent the moment he steps on the floor. His presence forces opponents to rethink their approach in the paint, on drives, and against pick and rolls. When he rotates, he changes shot attempts and shot selection for the entire opposing team. That two-way impact is the bedrock of any MVP case. MVP voters historically reward players who create clear and measurable team improvement. If the Spurs look markedly better when Wembanyama plays than when he does not, the argument writes itself. Beyond simple plus-minus, voters want a clear narrative. The team wins more games, is harder to guard, and its identity is centered on the candidate. If San Antonio climbs into the upper echelons of the Western Conference standings with Wembanyama as the fulcrum, that will be a huge boost. Expectations matter too. Surpassing preseason projections is a big part of the MVP story. If the Spurs are predicted to be middling and instead become elite, the contrast will draw attention. Conversely, if the Spurs are already expected to be top tier, the narrative has to lean on dominance and individual supremacy. Wembanyama must be not only great, but also unmistakably the engine of the team's success. Statistically, Wembanyama will be judged across traditional and advanced metrics. Counting stats like points, rebounds, blocks, assists, and shooting splits will matter, but modern voters and analysts weigh impact metrics like player efficiency rating, win shares, box plus, minus, and lineup-based plus-minus effects. Wembanyama's shot blocking and rim protection will elevate defensive metrics, while his playmaking and shooting will lift offensive efficiency. A realistic MVP profile for him would include being top 10 in defensive metrics and top 20 inches offensive impact. If he can post near 25 points, 10 rebounds, 3-4 blocks, and 5-6 assists per game, while sustaining efficient shooting, that stat line will be impossible to ignore. Efficiency is crucial. High usage without efficient scoring invites criticism. Wembanyama must balance usage with strong shooting percentages and playmaking that keeps the Spurs offense humming. Team success remains the single largest variable in MVP voting. Voters tend to prefer MVPs who play for teams with 50 or more wins, or at least teams that visibly compete for the top of their conference. For the 2025-26 season, a Spurs team that climbs into the top 4 or 5 in the West would create the context MVP voters favor. If Wembanyama leads San Antonio to a surprise top-tier record, the conversation will shift from potential to inevitable. The Spurs supporting cast will therefore be crucial. Role players who can knock down shots, defend, and limit turnovers will make Wembanyama's job easier and his impact appear larger. Depth matters too. A solid bench reduces load and keeps the team winning when starters rest. Ultimately, Wembanyama cannot carry the Spurs to elite status alone, but he can be the decisive catalyst. Narrative plays a surprisingly large role in MVP races. Human voters love a story. The rookie who rose, the veteran who reinvented himself, the injured star who came back stronger. Wembanyama's narrative is already compelling. The French phenom who transformed the Spurs timeline and reintroduced hope to a franchise hungry for identity. If the season unfolds with consistent highlight reel moments, record-breaking numbers, and a visible leadership growth, voters will be naturally drawn to him. But narratives can cut both ways. If he has prolonged slumps or the team flounders, the same narrative that elevated him can fray. Consistency is the antidote to narrative volatility. A long streak of high-level play that spans months, not just flashes of brilliance, is what builds a persuasive MVP case. Competition for the 2025-26 MVP will be stiff. Even if Wembanyama posts elite numbers, established stars like Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and others will remain in the conversation unless their teams regress. Those players have built reputations and often carry teams to the very top of the standings. For Wembanyama to overtake them, he needs both exceptional personal production and superior team outcomes relative to those stars. It helps if rival superstars suffer injuries or their teams underperform. But betting on other players failing is precarious. A stronger strategy is to maximize his own dominance and make the Spurs season undeniable. MVP years often require both personal excellence and a team narrative that eclipses other candidates. Defense is the silent MVP booster that voters sometimes undervalue until it becomes impossible to ignore. Wembanyama's defensive repertoire is diverse, rim protection, switchability, and perimeter disruption. His ability to challenge shots without fouling at a high rate will be a major differentiator. Advanced defensive metrics like opponent field goal percentage at the rim and team defensive rating with him on the floor will tell a compelling story if they rise significantly. Impact on transition defense and forcing turnovers through altered shots also contributes to possession-based advantages. If the Spurs become one of the top defensive teams in the league with Wembanyama anchoring the rotation, voters will take notice. Defense does not always translate to highlight reels, but it wins games, and MVP voters ultimately reward winning. Offensive development is equally important. Wembanyama's perimeter shot must remain reliable under pressure, and he must continue to expand his pick-and-roll efficiency. If he can consistently pull opposing bigs away from the paint and create driving lanes for guards, San Antonio's spacing will improve drastically. His passing out of double teams can elevate teammates and create easy points. A well-rounded offensive toolbox, face-up threes, mid-range craft, post moves, pick-and-roll reads will make him unstoppable. Also critical is his decision-making late in games, where the MVP aura often takes shape. Clutch moments, composed go-to plays, and leadership in crunch-time shift perceptions from star to most valuable. Durability cannot be overstated in this context. The NBA season is long, and MVP voters reward players who sustain elite performance over months. If Wembanyama misses significant time, his MVP candidacy will suffer no matter how spectacular his per-game numbers. Staying healthy and available while maintaining high minutes and workload is a practical prerequisite. Load management should be smart and conservative early in the season to prevent setbacks. A string of consecutive games where he dominates will be more convincing than isolated explosive performances. Modern sports science and Spurs training staff will be central to maximizing his on-court availability. Leadership and maturity shape how voters and the public perceive value beyond the stat sheet. Wembanyama's age and international upbringing make him both young and worldly at once. If he steps into a clear leadership role, communicates effectively, and raises the play of teammates, his intangible value will rise. Leaders who make their teammates better by design often receive MVP recognition because they embody the most valuable concept in literal form. Confidence tempered with humility can also endear him to voters and the wider NBA community. The way he handles media, carries himself during adversity, and responds to criticism will influence perception. Marketability and the spotlight matter for voting, even if they should not. If Wembanyama becomes the face of the league in the 2025-26 season, more voters may internalize his importance through increased visibility. National television appearances, viral highlights, and signature moments during marquee games amplify the MVP narrative. However, fame alone cannot secure MVP status. It must be paired with on-court dominance and team success. But a higher profile guarantees that his achievements are seen and remembered when ballots are cast. Contextual moments create lasting impressions. A dominant stretch against top opponents, a historic defensive performance in a national broadcast, or leading the Spurs to a signature win can be the tipping point. Voters often recall defining games when the race tightens. If Wembanyama posts a series of signature performances against elite teams, that will strengthen his case. Conversely, inconsistent play against strong opponents could cast doubt. The timing of peak performances matters as well. finishing the season strong often sways final ballots. Comparisons to past MVP winners reveal interesting truths. Most modern MVPs combine statistical dominance with team leadership and winning records. Wembanyama checks many boxes, but must still translate potential into sustained production. If his season resembles that of previous young MVPs who lifted their franchises rapidly, the historical precedent will aid his cause. But every era has its unique metrics, and voters may weigh different attributes depending on the broader basketball climate. That adaptive evaluation can work in Wembanyama's favor because his game is versatile and cross-generational. Public sentiment and media narratives are powerful forces in MVP races. Social media sparks and persistent storylines can nudge voter memory and ballot decisions. If sports media frames Wembanyama's season as transformative for the Spurs and the league, voters will absorb that narrative. However, the final votes come from a relatively small group of seasoned writers and broadcasters, so converting hype into votes requires substance. Crafting a season where the substance and the story align is Wembanyama's optimal strategy. Let's talk counters and vulnerabilities honestly. Opponents may attack his conditioning in late-game possessions or force him into situations where he needs to guard quicker perimeter players for extended stretches. Teams could scheme to draw fouls on him to reduce his minutes, or they may force Spurs lineups that pressure his decision-making. Sustaining shooting efficiency against physical defenses and in high-pressure moments will be a test. If those vulnerabilities appear during crucial stretches, rival candidates can capitalize. Acknowledging these potential pitfalls makes the analysis credible and helps identify what Wembanyama must improve to secure MVP. So, what would a plausible MVP roadmap look like this season? First, he must post elite two-way numbers that place him in the top tier of both defensive and offensive impact. Second, the Spurs must win at a rate that puts them among the West's best teams. Third, Wembanyama must avoid major injuries and show endurance across the season. Fourth, he needs defining moments and signature wins that attract national attention. Fifth, his supporting cast must be competent enough to maintain team balance while he leads in usage and decision-making. If these pieces align, the MVP award becomes not only plausible but probable. Emotionally, the idea of Wembanyama as MVP gives basketball fans a fresh kind of excitement. He represents a stylistic shift, tall players who can do everything, not just rebound or block shots. Watching him develop into a complete alpha is thrilling in a way that transcends wins and losses. There will be nights when the game feels like a preview of basketball's future, and that feeling alone is magnetic. Those moments, when a single player makes the arena hold its breath, are the ones voters remember. This is where emotion meets the ballot. If Wembanyama wins MVP, the award will signify more than individual glory. It will mark a turning point for the Spurs franchise, signaling that their rebuilding project has reached fruition. It will also signal a shift in the league's stylistic evolution, validating teams that build around ultra-versatile bigs. Fans and players will point to that season as proof that the game can bend to rare skill sets. For Wembanyama personally, the trophy would be an early career milestone that sets expectations for greatness. But if he falls short, the factors will still be instructive. A near miss could be attributed to team inconsistencies, voter conservatism, or the presence of an even more dominant candidate. The learning curve from such a season would inform how he and the Spurs adjust roster construction, in-game strategy, and load management going forward. Either outcome will shape his legacy. The journey itself will be endlessly analyzed. Predicting awards is always an exercise in probabilities, not certainties. There are externalities beyond any player's control: injuries, trades, the health of competitors, and unpredictable team chemistry. Still, assessing capability, trajectory, and context allows us to estimate likely outcomes. By those measures, Wembanyama entering the 2025-26 season as a serious MVP candidate is a rational conclusion. The remaining variables are execution, consistency, and the sometimes fickle court of public opinion. In practical terms for your video, focus on a clear narrative arc. Start with Wembanyama's uniqueness and the scope of his talent. Then transition to measurable evidence, stats, team impact, and defensive anchoring. Follow with the Spurs' potential trajectory and the supporting cast's role. Add a counterpoint section discussing vulnerabilities and rival candidates. Conclude with the emotional and historical stakes of an MVP season. Interweaving short emotional lines with analytical sections will keep viewers engaged. A few suggested emotional lines to use as voiceover beats. To close, Victor Wembanyama has the toolkit, the trajectory, and the cultural tension to be a leading MVP candidate in 2025-26. His path will require sustained excellence, team success, and defining moments that capture the imagination of voters and fans alike. If all those elements come together, he will not just win an award, he will alter how we think about the position and the game itself. Thank you for watching this deep dive on Victor Wembanyama and his MVP possibilities for the 2025-26 season. If you enjoyed this analysis, please like, share, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to NBA Stories for more in-depth content. Thank you.